Hi, this is Brendan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Adam and Joel for another episode of Horror Express. And today we're going to be talking about Suspiria, the 1977 Dario Argento movie. This is a classic horror film. It's kind of known for its stylistic depiction of low-level supernatural and high-level violence. It's a fairly simple story, and I don't want to give all the details away because there's a secret at this ballerina academy, and I don't want to say what the secret is until deeper into the discussion. But it's a very interesting and frightening movie, I think. This is one that is not available on Prime, so if you want to see it, you can watch it on Tubi. I will let people know because I watched it in preparation for this on Tubi, and it does not look like the Blu-ray or just other better online streaming services. So if you do watch it there, be prepared for a little bit of lower resolution than you might want. You might want to watch it on a smaller window than the full screen. But if you can get it on Blu-ray, it's a beautiful movie, so it's definitely worth checking out. And why don't I kick it over to you guys and see what you guys thought about this film?
Adam, I'm sure you've seen this movie more than I have. I saw it twice, once when I was way too young to see it, and then recently. But I'm interested in what you have to say about it. I'm actually pretty curious.
All right. I haven't watched this movie in 20 years myself. Okay. And I've only ever seen it on videotape. So it's like, This is really my first time really seeing it. I mean, I appreciated it was a beautiful movie within what I could see, but man, yeah, I picked up, you were talking about the quality. I picked up the Blu-ray from Synapse, which is a 4K restoration. Fantastic. I highly recommend it. I was just blown away seeing this movie, and just leaving plot aside or anything, it's just a visual masterpiece. It's in Technicolor. It's just stunning. It's very dreamlike in a way. It doesn't quite feel like the real world. It's very impressionistic. The sets are I don't know. This is just a hard movie to talk about, just because it just operates on this very emotional visual level. But I'm going to kick it back to Brendan while I try and get a coherent thought on this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like I like Italian horror movies in terms of like the look and everything like that. Dario Argento, especially films like this, and my favorite is The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. I think he just has this style that, like Adam was saying, in this case is particularly dreamy. But he's also one of these directors. One of my favorite kinds of movies to watch are ones where the visuals and the sound really blend together perfectly.
Yes,
and this is that type. And Dario Argento is that way. He always has a soundtrack that, or some clip of music that just really works in the movie and helps drive everything. And that Goblin theme song that they keep playing is just so perfect. And I think that for me, what makes Suspiria so fun to watch, once you know the whole story and everything, is the beauty of the scenes and the way that music just kind of like, it almost like glides you into the next portion of the film. Like I think a good example of that is like in the opening when she comes in she goes to Bavaria and she gets in the airport, and the moment she walks through those sliding doors, number one, he makes sliding doors scary. Like the fact that he makes a sliding door and a scarf whipping up, that's like H.P. Lovecraft level atmospherics.
I feel like he's just showing off at that point. He's going, "Look, I made you scared of the sliding door. Guess what?
But here's from here. He does, but he also makes it beautiful, and I think that's what drives it up to this higher level. But then that's also when the Goblin soundtrack kicks in, and if I remember, maybe it's a moment later.
No, that's like it. Yeah, and then she merges into that driving rain, and it's dark.
And
I strongly recommend. Yeah, and I strongly recommend, if you watch this, if you don't have surround sound headphones, this is like a headphone movie. It's like just having that sound all around you just makes a huge difference with this movie.
But the colors, the way the shots are framed, the way the violence is depicted. Like I mean again, a lot of people might object to, and again, by present day standards, this movie isn't particularly violent. I'm not sure what the.
It is pretty shocking. Like, I was watching
shocking.
it here. What was it? A week ago? Not even a week ago at this point. And like, I actually had a few moments in this movie where I had trouble looking at the screen. That rarely happens to me.
Yeah.
Just because when they hit you with the violence, it's early and it's really, really, really intense.
Yeah.
And there's something about the atmosphere of this movie and just the boldness and the extremity of the violence that really hits.
It uses
the thing is
violence.
too, there's only a few incidents of violence in the movie too, so you don't get jaded. You don't reach a point where it's like, because there's only a few cases of very intense violence, when it hits, it really hits.
I think number one, it really raises the stakes because. So just to get to the beginning of the movie where she goes to the school and then this woman just frantically leaves the academy and mutters some things which turn out to be clues later in the movie, but we don't hear it at first. We don't really know what she said. We just know she looks crazed and she leaves. And then this lady goes and gets murdered in a really horrible way. But you know that this is basically what's awaiting the protagonist because it's like there's something similar. I mean, they're different as can be in terms of they have different color hair and all this other stuff, but they seem to be occupying the same space in the school, if that makes sense. And so
you do get that impression, and the movie never explicitly tells you that. It's just something you kind of read into the structure of how the characters operate and like the way they put it all together. It's really a brilliant piece of filmmaking in that regard.
And it also uses violence, I think, in a way similar to how a movie like Lady Snowblood does, which is it realizes that blood is part of the palette, right? It's part of the overall color scheme. Red is clearly a thematic color in the movie. Like there's a lot of red, and so it even though it's incredibly violent, there's something very artistic about like the scene where the woman is stabbed. They literally show the woman getting stabbed in the heart, like that, like not like you see a person getting stabbed in the heart from a jet. You see the blade go into the heart. It's a very graphic scene, and then she falls through a stained glass window, gets strangled by dangling wires or something. Then her body collapses in the next shot to the ground, and there's like something impaling her and jagged. It's very graphic, but it's also incredibly artistic. And so it's
weirdly beautiful. It's like you don't often say that, but it's amazing.
It's the way it's just done and so it almost makes you feel bad appreciating the beauty of it, right? Because it's so graphic. I think that I don't know if that's his intent or not, but a lot of Argento movies do that. So it wouldn't surprise me if he likes that juxtaposition of emotion.
There's sort of a high fashion element to that, because high fashion does that a lot too, or it'll like depict something like really awful or gory, but like it's shot really beautifully and the color palette is ingeniously engineered and it's all crisp and there's all these beautiful people in it. It reminds me of that movie Neon Demon. You guys ever see that one?
I haven't seen that one, no.
You'd probably appreciate it if you liked this one. Yeah, it's got the exact same kind of energy where it has these like a lot of people in this movie are like really, really beautiful. And
if they're not beautiful, they're like there's something compelling about them.
Yeah,
right?
They're visually
really
captivating.
Well cast.
This cast is all of them. I don't think there's a boring face among them, and so there is something that captures you visually about the look of the characters, and it's the same way with Neon Demon, where like it's about fashion models. So like obviously they get really beautiful people and they get captivating people, and then I'm not going to spoil Neon Demon for you, but I will at least say that the movie begins with one of those like high gore, super high fashion kind of shoots, and it's not like it's all makeup, but like it's startling like how beautiful and grotesque it is, and how like there's a weird harmony between those extremes that's really sort of, like you say, it's uncomfortable because you want to appreciate the beauty of it, but at the same time you're repulsed by the subject.
It's like tragic opera or something, right? It's like this idea of the stuff that is like actually really moving is violence, tragedy. Like, do you know what I mean? It's never people having a good time, or you
No,
want
I
to
think
you
well.
want to see something that's like that sort of pulls you out from your normal experience and is also emotionally compelling. And so I feel like that's why something like this works, again, with the music, with the violence, and just I don't know, there's also like a Dracula quality to the way this movie is set up, I feel.
Yeah,
It's
where
definitely
Dracula's a really good
operatic
comparison.
is definitely a good word to describe
Yeah.
this movie, I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, like operatic, like the way the violence in Excalibur is operatic, right? There's
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
there's something like something about Wagner, being pumped into the room while Mordred and Arthur are impaling each other. It's just this it's grotesque, but it's also there's like a beauty to it, and there's something moving about it. And it's one of those things where sometimes I think our instinctual responses to this stuff is off the mark because of that. Because people people know this is a classic, but it wasn't always the case. And so it's easy to sort of file a movie like this away with stuff like Friday the 13th or something. You know what I mean? And not saying that as a disparagement to Friday the 13th, but you know what I mean when it's sort of this. It could be mistaken for just like a cruel depiction
Slasher
of violence.
film.
Yeah.
Well, it's not exploitative. It's artistic, and there's an important distinction between those two categories. It's like you said, blood is a part of the palette. It's using the extremity of the violence to try to get at a certain artistic thing, and like you can. Like schlock is just a little bit different. Exploitation is a different thing, and like we've probably all seen like Django Unchained and things like Tarantino movies where he takes exploitation and elevates it to art. But you must understand, it didn't begin there. It was exploitation at first. It was pretty gruesome for the sake of gruesomeness.
Well, I do think it depends on the exploitation movie. I will say
some of them are brilliant.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, the fact it's hard, as you mentioned, Joel, you look away from you want to look away from the screen at times. I definitely had moments in that, and that when you've reached that, you aren't just doing exploitive. Hey, check out this cool gore. It's like I was generally like, I don't want to see this happening to this person, feeling which you don't get.
Good job
really
of foreshadowing.
Friday the 13th movie.
Yeah, you want to see the kills on Friday the 13th. Here, they do this thing where they're foreshadowing the agony and the horror of what's about to happen, and it builds this incredible tension. And at least in, I want to say I think there's only like 3 or 4 kills in this movie. And again, I don't want to spoil it, but the one where the girl's alone and she meets her untimely demise via trap. That's the one where, even though I knew something horrible was going to happen, I didn't expect it to be that horrible. That actually got me.
They misdirected you.
No.
You thought she was going to get stabbed, and she ends up getting killed by razor wire or something.
That's so horrible.
Yeah,
so horrible.
God.
And also, it's even more horrible because she's like the nicest person in the whole movie to the protagonist.
I know. Well, it's just that the situation she's in too. It's like, what do you do in that situation? It's just like so hopeless. It's like the more you're trying to escape, the worse it gets. And it's
it almost gets you to say, just give up and let it be over quick, right? Like that's
like even screaming for help. It's like the people that are gonna come are not gonna help you. It's just such a hopeless situation.
It's hopeless and agonizing, and it was like it felt like I felt physically uncomfortable watching it. Like that's how horrible it was. It was like
we reviewed a lot of horror movies, and I can't think of anything worse we've watched than that scene. I can't.
The scene with the maggots. The maggot scene was pretty. Well,
I think.
The maggot scene. That almost that was shocking and interesting. I liked that scene, and especially because it almost like it's one of those pieces of the film that like my forebrain wants to call that like a puzzle piece, oh, this is gonna help me figure this out, but like at the end of the movie I still don't exactly know, like the rest of the movie's all together and I have this extra piece and I'm like, well, I'm not actually certain where it goes. It could go in several places, But I like that
in
visually.
terms of why the maggots were there, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, like they give you a really complete and compelling like explanation that also really feels like an excuse, you know?
Yeah. Well, I feel
Yeah.
like, I feel like it is just the corruption of the place. Like, you know, there's food up there and it rotted, but I feel like it's just this place is so corrupt. I kind of feel as
I mean, it could have been a
expressing.
dead body. There could have been a body in there, but you don't necessarily need to even know. Like the important thing about that scene, I think that's the reason that scene works and why so much of the scares in the movie work is because it's actually horror, and horror is a distinct thing from fear or terror, right?
Yeah.
And so they do a good job of, you don't know what's happening the first several times maggots hop down on somebody's head. You don't even you just know something's off because you see little flickers across the screen. And then at a certain point you see like your first maggot and it's like, oh, okay, I guess she's got a maggot in her hair for some reason. And then you see that there's more, and then you're like, oh my God, there's something wrong with her hair. Like, what's going on? And then you realize, oh no, they're falling from the ceiling. And you say, oh my God, the whole school. It's just this incremental increase in the horror.
It's beautiful how they stage it. It really is.
Yeah.
Because like I thought it was a prank at first, like someone had put maggots in her hairbrush. I'm like, okay, so they're gonna be mean to her. And it's no, the whole ceiling is alive with maggots and they're dropping into everyone's hair, and it's just it's so gross.
And I think all of the horror is like that in this movie. Like everything from the first woman who dies, she's almost like a side character at first. You know something's really off about her. And there's that ominous shot of her running through the woods. And then she gets to her friend's house or wherever that is, and you think, oh, she's safe. She's fine. You know, and
it is. Opening of this movie is interesting too, just because you mentioned the woods thing, because it's like it starts with a little voiceover and it's so mundane. It's like her airplane left at 7:45 and she arrived in Germany at 8:07. It's just like all these mundane facts, and you kind of get to that door. You know, when she goes through the sliding door, it's like then into the car and then through the woods, and you just leave reality at that point.
But you know,
it's like you're going to some strange place.
You leave reality, but it is anchored in the mundane. A sliding door is a mundane thing, and even her asking about the weather becomes this scary thing where she says, "Hey, is it going to rain this hard?" And the guy just looks at her, doesn't say anything. He just kind of glares at her like she's violated some taboo when she asks this question. And then he very slowly I forget what he even says in response, but he doesn't give an answer for like, it feels like minutes, you know?
Yeah, they draw that moment out. Like the awkwardness is something, again, the filmmakers are brilliant because whatever the characters are experiencing, they make you experience too, and none of it's pleasant.
Yeah, well, it's just that the beginning of the conversation where she's giving the address, and she keeps repeating it, and then she has to show him, and he it's sort of German. She didn't have the German pronunciation right. He's like, yeah, but it's just setting up the fact she's in an unfamiliar, unknown place. It's setting up the alienation she's going through even before you get to anything supernatural in any way.
And then you get there, and everybody there has this weird fixation with money, right? Like it's not really explained, but you know it's important, and it helps alienate her further from the world. And then you have weird character. What's his name? Pavlos, the guy with the new teeth, and like the two head mistresses, and they couldn't be more different than each other, but they're both very creepy in their own way. One has more of a Nurse Ratched type personality, and the other one is almost more of a, I don't know how you would put it, but more of like an elegant, charming person. And that's sort of her ability to disarm is what makes her scary. But again, I keep thinking of Dracula when I watch this movie, just because it's sort of this slow realization of entrapment that she's in, or in terms of like the dangers that are surrounding her at this academy.
Yeah, and Dracula's like the perfect one to compare it to as well. Like, and like, of course, we did that wonderful, almost lost review of Bram Stoker's Dracula, but like, which we need to revisit at some point so we can get good audio of that.
Yeah,
but like that's really good for kind of like What a wonderful comparison, you know? Because you're right. Like everything kind of seems on the up and up, but just a little bit off at first, and then gradually you realize that you are adrift in this ocean of horrors that you have no concept of how you got there and no ability to escape. I love it.
Yeah, when you first mentioned Dracula earlier in the podcast, I wasn't sure where you were going, but no, you're totally right. It didn't click for me, but now, yeah, it is like that journey that Harker's
Yeah.
take.
Yeah,
Very
it's the
much
Harker
like it.
sequence. It's the Harker.
Yeah.
going
I didn't jump to Harker, but yeah, that makes total sense.
And the witch kind of occupies a similar, like she's this figure similar to Dracula. You know, it's just this evil that sort of moves around and like is, establishes herself and has this. She now has this school of, with this coven around. I don't know. It just feels very because number one, it's set in a foreign place, right? It's set in Bavaria, which I forget.
Yeah,
Is the main character from America? Is that?
Yeah,
she's American, right?
Yeah, she's from New York, I think.
But the witch is also from outside of Bavaria, right? Wasn't she? So
I forgot she was, but I've forgotten where she came from.
And so it's it's just I don't know. It's it just kind of has Dracula elements to it, I think. The other thing is I like how the solution to the movie, the flower that you have to, the iris that you have to move, they explain like that secret is given to you while she's talking to the lady right in front of the paint, like right in front of the flower painting itself. And so it's I just love the part where she's in front of that painting too. I mean, having seen this for the first time with quality picture, it was just that sequence with her standing in front of all that painting of all the doors, trying to figure out where the door is. Yeah. It's just there's something magical about that. But I mean the scene when she's talking to the headmistress and she's saying, "Oh, she told me two things. She said secret and she said like iris or blue iris or something like that." And they're talking in the room right in front of the flower, and it's kind of like Carlito's Way, where he shows you everything. He shows you everything. Yeah. And you're still surprised when it's that kind of a thing where it's like, oh, I should have picked up on. She said iris, and there's an iris right behind her. It's pretty obvious. But I mean, and I'm sure a lot of people say they noticed, but I don't think anybody.
I totally didn't. Yeah. No,
I didn't notice. No, you got.
To be fair, this movie is an absolute feast for your senses. Like you are overstimulated seconds into this movie.
Yeah.
So subtle details like there being an iris in the background when she mentions an iris. I mean, like at that point in the movie, you're so early, you're as disoriented and overwhelmed as she is, which is great filmmaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. You know what I like too? I like the sequence with the blind man with the dog. I thought that was one of the more terrifying moments.
That was good.
That was a look away moment for me. Yeah. Whenever he's in that big courtyard and you just what is it? Is it like flapping wings or an eagle or something that you're hearing? And you're just like, I don't know, my hackles were really far up. And I'm like, that dog is going to murder him. And it's horrible. And I was just like, oh, I don't know if I can watch this.
Yeah, just that huge sense of space, too. He's just in that vast, public square or whatever.
Yeah, and like, you get... It's completely dark to him. There's a room in Silent Hill 2, which is exactly that. You're underground in this prison complex, and you open the door, and it's all been cramped corridors and prison cells up till now. And this is just this expansive, giant, dark, unlit room. And you're like, oh, okay. Oh. And so you start walking, and this at one point you've lost all the walls, and you hear a horse galloping. It's just like, oh, God. That was.
Go ahead.
That sense of enormity is you're vulnerable from every angle. It's so frightening.
Yeah. What's cool about it too is it's a much bigger space than all of the other areas in the movie, right? Like you're saying, but it's shot in a way where you're kind of getting the blind character's perspective, where you know that the sounds are coming almost from where you're looking from. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And you never really get to see that section. You know what I mean? You just get to see the building and the guy. The building and the guy, the dog, the guy, the building. You never get any other details to really, you know what I mean?
You do. Again, if the character feels it, you feel it in this movie. And you feel like you're in this large area of unknowns and mystery where you know a threat is coming towards you.
Yeah. Yeah. And the guy does a good job of being freaked out, too. Like, he's just...
Yeah.
really
like
losing it, and it kind of comes on the heel of him having this emotional interaction with the other headmistress, who's accuses his dog of biting like the nephew, I think.
Yeah, and he's like, "What the hell are you talking about? My dog doesn't bite." And like I really liked that scene where he like stands up for the honor of his dog and walks out because he's insulted. I'm like, that's such a true scene. I could imagine that unfolding in real, actual life, and it gave me such sympathy for him later on when he was like targeted to be destroyed by this evil coven. It's like, oh, you assholes! Now I hate you.
Yeah, that's exactly.
A good point.
They make you really like this guy right before the scene where they kill him. So
the pacing in this movie is pretty remarkable. Honestly, they do a lot of that efficiency like that, where there's just like, here's the setup, here's the payoff. I don't know, like, it's not that complicated of a movie when you finally get your bearings, and it takes you about half or so of the movie to kind of be like, okay, something squiffy's going on at the school. They're drugging the lady. They're trying to keep some kind of secret. They've got some kind of secret meeting they're going to, and you can hear their footsteps. Okay, I'm getting it. And so you kind of get oriented as the movie goes on.
Yeah.
But it's once you get to that point of orientation, it's really pretty straightforward. What it does, though, which I really like, is that with that really kind of bare bones plot, you have all these little sub things going on, all the little mystery between her and her friend, which ends tragically in razor wires. We figured out the little intro where the lady tries to flee the school and is killed by some mysterious set of like Ganon hands from the wall. It reminded me of The Legend of Zelda. I've been playing a lot of the new Legend of Zelda games, so that's why. There's these little like vignettes, like the blind guy, that doesn't like, it's not central to the central characters of the central plot, but it's important to the fabric of the movie. And it almost feels like a bunch of like little short stories. It's a unique and fascinating texture for a movie, and I don't see a lot of movies that are bold enough with their to do that. A lot of them. I think that we have this concept of screenwriting where we have to be really focused on this central story we're telling.
Yeah.
And this movie defies that convention and to great effect. So it's really entertaining just for that.
Yeah, it's almost, and again, we were talking about this before the podcast, and Adam and I have not seen the new one, and we don't have any negative opinions of the new one, but we have had very strong negative reactions to the way people talk about the new one in relation to the old one, specifically relating to story, where people have sort of taken up this description of Suspiria where the story is disappointing or not a good story, and I just kind of like you were saying, kind of like how Adam mentioned that this is very dreamlike. It's not meant to be experienced in that way. It's meant to be. It's a movie that you're meant to feel, and that you're meant to be immersed in. And it still does have a story. It's just not. I don't know. I mentioned this before we were recording, but there aren't. Story isn't like the prime thing when you go to a horror movie. Like when you go to a horror movie,
that's important.
You don't. You're not there to get like a satisfying story that's tied up in a bow. Some movies will do that, but even a movie like, say, Nosferatu, the story's not really what's significant to Nosferatu. What's significant is how scary that movie is and how it pulls you in.
Scary.
Yeah, and I would say that of most successful horror movies, it's not necessarily that they have this super convoluted story or complex story and also I feel like when people talk about good story now and they're talking about movies like this or whatever, I don't think that I have the same sensibilities of what makes for a good story as a lot of the commentary I've seen around Suspiria. And again, I'm actually quite excited to see the new Suspiria movie. I don't have anything against it. The conversation surrounding it and story, I feel like just in connection to what you were saying about story here, not all movies have to be like a story. Some movies have to be more like.
Here's something important. They shouldn't, right? I understand the critique from that angle of here is how movies are structured. Here is what good characterization looks like. But no, I agree with you. Not every movie should be like that. Movies do a lot of things. Like you can't look at a movie like, what was I'm trying to think of any of the Jodorowsky movies that I've seen, like what was it, Mystic Mountain or Magic Mountain or whatever that was. You can't look at a movie like that and be like, oh, this has got to be a 3-act structure. That's not what we're doing here, guys. You need, sometimes movies do other things.
Yeah, and if they are doing that, they should do it well. But they're not all doing that, and they're not all. It's a medium it's a visual and sound medium. It's not literary. And so
that's like judging every single painting by the same standard. Like, look, there's different. Some paintings are not doing what other paintings are doing. You can't compare a Jackson Pollock to, like. I'm struggling for another one. Give me a realistic one here.
Leonardo da Vinci. Is that?
That's who I had in mind, but that seemed kind of cliche.
My wife is on a Leonardo da Vinci.
Norman Rockwell.
Norman Rockwell. There we go. There's a guy that did brilliant stuff. Okay, so Norman Rockwell does what he does brilliantly. He captures people in an honest and still strangely flattering way. And Jackson Pollock puts dots and lines on a page, and they're both art, and they both are brilliant in their own regard. But you can't judge them by the same standard. It's just not possible.
The other thing that has come up, and again, I want to be clear, I'm not attacking the new Suspiria. I'm very excited to see it. But the other thing that's come up in conversations around it is this idea that the new Suspiria finally explains everything. And we were having a conversation about how
not only is everything that criticism
perfectly explained,
100% twice.
It needs to be
explained twice.
Yeah, but you don't need everything to be explained in a horror movie. Sometimes you want lingering questions. You want a certain degree of ambiguity. Mythology, like building a mythos, doesn't necessarily make for a better horror movie.
Just because you can write it succinctly in a wiki entry doesn't make it better, dipshits.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that people also don't realize is that the mythology in Suspiria, Argento has expanded that in subsequent movies. Mm-hmm. So in, like, I think Inferno is the name of the second film. There's another movie that came up much more recently as well. Which
we're not going to mention because it's pretty bad.
Well, not only that, but even Inferno is. I'll maybe we can watch Inferno and have a discussion about it. I don't want to get too deep into it, but I think there's a legitimate question of whether expanding on Suspiria added to it at all. Do you know what I mean? That maybe it didn't need additional exploration. And so it's sort of like the old Star Wars problem. Sometimes you don't want to explain how, why everything is in the movie. It's sometimes you leave it to people's imagination, and it's better as a result. Like from this film, you can kind of look at the witch and the coven, and you can imagine all of the possible things that are going on in the world related to them.
The thing is, with horror too, I mean, if you're dealing with supernatural horror, if supernatural becomes fully explained, it loses its supernaturalness. Yeah. It's just the other scientific rules you're operating.
Yeah.
This never quite reaches the point where, I get everything now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
But for the sake of clarity, like Joel was saying, this movie explains everything. There's a scene in the middle.
Yeah.
One guy says, yes, this is what the lady said was going on. And then he's like, and there's a professor over there if you want to talk to him about witchcraft specifically. And she goes over and speaks to the professor. And he gives her like the whole backstory on like how the academy was formed, how, like the name of the witch, where she comes from. And then he even explains like the cosmology of witchcraft in the movie.
Their modus operandi.
Yeah.
Like, actually, I love that scene because the way they structure it is really funny. It's a total comedy beat. The one guy is talking to her. She's like, I have all these doubts and I don't know what's going on. And he's like, there's this ridiculous and stupid thing where people think it's witches. And that's ridiculous. Here's exactly what they say and how it works. And here's a college professor that will further debunk it. Then he leaves. The college professor comes up and he's dead in the face. It's like, witches are real. You're dealing with them. Here's exactly what they do.
Yeah.
And here's
so funny.
Yeah, here's what you need to do to survive this.
No, you captured the magic of that scene perfectly, because that is like the humor is very, very present, and it's done in like a nice horror movie way where it's not like there's a drum beat and you're supposed to laugh, but the more you reflect on that scene, the more you're like, wait a second, like
horror and comedy have a lot in common.
Yeah.
And there is something kind of alarming about, because he's set up to be like, oh, this is another, intelligent, modern-minded person. And the fact that he's like, if you're dealing with a witch, here's how you kill it, is like great. Like there's something actually kind of shocking about that. If that happened, I'd be like, oh my God, there's real witches. Like that would be my first reaction. I'm a scientific rationalist myself. And yet, if an old professor who was extremely lauded and it was like, yeah, you're dealing with an actual witch, you need here are the tools to kill it. Like, okay, well, I guess we're going on this journey now. So that is shocking, but it's also hilarious.
Yeah.
I definitely I think you're onto something there. And also, the line in the movie is something like, their goal is great personal wealth, but only achieved by causing the suffering of others.
Yep.
Which I think is
straightforward.
That's a perfectly good explanation for a lot of what's going on in the movie.
That's what's happening.
Yeah, and it also ties into
the situation.
It explains also why everybody's so obsessed with money when they get. So.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. This movie has no loose ends. It's like completely airtight. Everything's explained. I couldn't imagine wanting more explanation after the exposition scene where we get the full exposition twice in a row. And then it's hammered home by her discovering that that's all true. In the very next sequence. It's so clear.
I don't get because whenever I see criticisms of Suspiria, and I'm not saying it's like, flawless. Like people can have criticism.
Everything's subject to critique, but some critiques are stupid, and it's important to tell people that.
Well, like one that I don't like is people will complain like, oh, the woman is like too in peril or something like something about like how she's like whatever it is. But the point of this movie is you're supposed to feel the peril that she's in.
No, dude.
So
it wasn't that she was in peril; I was in peril. Damn it!
So it's not.
I mean, it's not like she doesn't fight back anyway. I find that a really flawed argument. I mean, yeah, she's in peril. I mean,
it's a horror
Indiana
movie.
Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark is in peril. I mean, I don't think that's a legit argument. It's how you handle. She handles the peril very well in this movie.
Yeah, she's pretty butch at the end of this.
I feel like sometimes when people talk about movies like this, they talk specifically about those kind of characters. What they're looking for is kind of like a spunky, quippy type. They want to. It's sort of like that. To me, that's one of the things that can often drain the believability out of the scene.
Look, there is
she's a very strong character early on. I mean, she refuses to move into the school. She's like, oh, I'm happy living on my own. I don't want to be like some kid living at a boarding school. It's like she's a very independent minded person. They don't
and whenever she's the one who overcomes the poison that they're feeding her, she figures out how to beat that. She figures out the mystery. Yeah. She gets to the heart of it. She fights the witch.
She stabs the witch with a
she wins, dude. Excellent final girl energy. But if you really have to have the spunky protagonist with an actual good horror movie, one movie did it perfectly. It's called Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Go watch it. That's a great movie.
I mean, and I liked Buffy, but I wouldn't want every movie to be modeled on that as the.
No, exactly. But I mean, they have the perfect movie for it if they want to watch it. Go watch it.
Watch your weed and heroin. There's plenty of weed and heroines out there.
I love weed and heroin. Let's put that on the record. Wait.
Yeah.
But definitely, people, I would. Well, actually, do we have anything else we want to talk about with this film?
Aside from weed and heroin?
Well, I don't know where you're getting that, but okay. There are definitely genres where that would be an appropriate segment of the discussion, but yeah. So no, I think it's a really great movie. I highly recommend. I would say it's a must-see horror movie if you like horror films. Like this is one that you really have to see, and ideally, if you can, on Blu-ray or on some, you want to see it in all of its glory. If you do see it on a streaming service where the resolution is limited, just try to project a certain amount of charity onto what you're seeing, because you are missing a lot of the beauty of it.
I'll say
Yeah.
I watched it on Tubi too, and I was really impressed with the visuals. So I can't imagine how mind blowing they are in 4K.
They look so
Well,
much better. It's you know what it
I
is.
will say
Tubi
I was impressed by it when I watched it on videotape 20 years ago. I mean, it's still,
Yeah.
as I said, but it was just so much better when you go up to Blu-ray. But yeah, it's still worth watching in any format.
it looks good on Tubi. It's just that it's like what 716 resolution, some weird resolution. And so if you keep it in the small box and look back a little bit, it looks fine. If you expand it into the full screen,
Oh, okay. I didn't do
start
that. I
to
kept it
see.
in the small box.
Yeah, you will see all
Yeah.
of the flow. And I like watching things in the full screen because I want to be fully in the movie. And so,
You're an old man, and your eyes are going. So.
well, no, I just like the experience of not seeing like my email when I'm watching a classic film. I want to see. I want everything I'm watching to be the director's vision of the movie. You know.
I mean, fair enough. Fair enough.
But I mean, again, Tubi is a perfectly good place to see it. I just want people to understand that, like, if they expand it, watch it in full screen, like the letters on the walls will be unclear and things like that. Like you just won't be getting the clarity of the film. So you know, it's just something to keep in mind. And I don't know where else it's streaming. I don't know if it's available anywhere right now.
Yeah, well, the fact that Amazon made a remake and they didn't make this available is nothing
Yeah.
less than a cinema crime. Like,
Yeah.
come on, guys. And the tragedy is their remake is really good. It is. Like, you could have them both, and I wouldn't get confused.
You should have them both. Like
I would want to watch both of them.
watching one would lead you to the other, right? So it just doesn't.
Well, it
Yeah.
does. And the fun thing is the new one has a lot, like, it has a lot of really clever and well put in callbacks to this movie that aren't like, they're not exploitative. They're good. Like they share a couple of actors in common. I won't spoil it for you guys, but you're going to recognize them. And like the mythology is connected, and it's just, there's a lot of little nifty things. So if you like the original Suspiria, you can watch this new one, and it's good. It's enjoyable. It's its own distinct film, you know? And for some reason, they don't let you have that experience easily. You gotta go and find a Blu-ray or do it on Tubi. I don't know. It's just kind of like...
Increasingly, I'm encouraging people to get physical media because the streaming services are getting worse and worse in terms of availability, and you just never know which version you're getting and all that stuff. So I think, like we tried to watch Amadeus. We did watch it a few weeks ago, and they only have the director's cut, which is just not as good as the theatrical cut. It's just not a good version of the movie, in my opinion. Some people disagree, but like I think most people, the consensus is the theatrical cut is better. It definitely feels way different watching the director's cut. So I like, with physical media, you at least have a little more control over that sometimes, what you're watching. So
yeah, there's been a lot of rumors about like movies being edited and things like the Criterion Collection and what have you without any fanfare.
Yeah,
that's kind of
the Criterion doing that is boggling. I mean, for me, it's like I'm not even going to buy physical media from Criterion anymore. It's like, well, like if you're cutting your streaming, I don't know. Your whole thing was you were a big, you know, cinema fan label.
They're supposed to
It's
be
like, if you're
archiving classic
why
cinema,
would I
right?
buy anything from you ever again? Like,
Yeah,
you can't trust them.
That's like a museum putting a drape over the breasts of a statue. Do you know what I mean? It's that
Exactly.
It's alarming levels of censorship. Like,
I am done. I actually subscribed to the Criterion channel, like streaming service, until last week. And the second that story broke about the French Connection, I went straight to my computer and canceled. Boom, you're done.
Censoring it also misses the point of the scene too. Like the scene isn't there to indulge in the use of that language. It's there to establish important traits about the character.
Well, I'm
right?
not a child. I'm an adult subscribing to your movie channel. Don't baby me, you jerks. So
I understand what you mean. And again, I think this might be generational, but for me, I really I want to be able to see the movie as it, you know. I understand sometimes directors, while they're still alive, will change movies or whatever. I mean, if they want to do that, I'll watch the newer version they want to watch.
I don't even agree with
access.
that.
No, I'm with that.
I don't even agree with that.
Those
I mean,
people
it's
are
like
cowards.
it's like Lucas taking out all the original effects out of Star Wars. He didn't do the effects in Star Wars. The greatest special effects artist of that generation worked on that movie.
Yeah,
and he destroyed their work. That was not his work to destroy.
Well, I would agree with
he was
you.
The director.
I would definitely agree with you. What I was going to say was that I think the original should always be available. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
The
If you want to
problem
make
with
another
Lucas is
version.
Lucas is doing this thing where he wants to he like changes it and then gets rid of the old versions and acts like the changes are never made in the first place, even though they're clearly like modern CG. You know, it's just annoying. And also, the other thing about Lucas that's particularly annoying is the changes he makes take away from the visuals of the movie because he'll put things in there that aren't in symmetry with the shots that he composed in the 70s when he made the movie. So it's like, why is there like an elephant-like creature disrupting the framing?
Walking through the middle of the screen and blocking everything.
Are in the Return to the Jedi, like in the whole Jabba's palace where they just add a bunch of CG creatures grabbing the camera and shouting at it, and it's like, what are you doing?
Not only that, but they took out the original song, which was actually like one of my favorite parts of that movie. What's her name? Sliced Noodles or whatever. I used to like that because she's belting out this kind of humorous song, but it worked oddly for the movie. And then they throw in this weird musical number that's like straight out of Broadway and just doesn't feel like a Star Wars film and breaks the fourth wall. And it's just, I don't know. It's yeah. I mean, we could go on about it. We're not supposed to deviate into Star Wars territory, but
no.
Yeah.
It's like even physical media is suspect to me now. It's disappointing. But yeah, it's just. I think if you allow companies to do this stuff, it's like even if you agree with what they're doing now, once you've set the precedent that, hey, corporations can just change your movies, hey, the next CEO might have a different agenda and you might not like it so much. So it's like, they're only cutting out stuff this side of the political aisle still dislikes, but next time they might be the opposite side and they're cutting out everything you like. So just keep that in mind. People.
The other thing to keep in mind too is even from the perspective of like, say you're politically bothered by the content or whatever and they take it out.
Yeah.
The problem with that, like just from a historical perspective, is these are kind of like primary sources for people. This is how people. So when somebody goes back and looks at the movie, now they don't know that was there, and that's going to change. Like, if you think it was a sin, you should want it to be preserved in the movie because now you've sort of whitewashed this element of the movie out so that blemish has been removed. And, you know, I think you want that to be on the record if that's a concern of yours. So there's other reasons to want these things in there. It would be like Birth of a Nation is always a very like difficult film because it's considered an important piece of filmmaking that's also like a very good piece of filmmaking, but the message is absolutely atrocious. And propagandistic. And if you go back,
whitewashing history if you get rid of it. So,
not even that. But
history is its own problem.
But what if you went back and you changed it to take out all of the messaging and just preserve the good qualities of the movie?
Yeah.
You can see the problem there, right? Like it's okay, now that crime has been erased from history because you've edited it. So I think that's the, you know, again, we don't normally talk about this kind of stuff here, but I think in terms of, you know, because it is relevant to, you know, the idea of cinema and movies.
This particular movie, like we said, was suppressed by Amazon after they made their remake, and there was no purpose beyond that, like just.
Well, do we know that for a fact? Is that the reason that this was not put up on Amazon, or were there other?
I mean, here's the thing: they didn't elaborate on their reason at all.
Because sometimes, I mean, to be fair, sometimes Amazon just doesn't have the rights to a movie, but I find it perplexing that when you type in Suspiria, the first thing to pop up is Amazon's.
If Tubi can get the rights to it, I think that Amazon could have gotten it.
Probably.
That strikes me as we couldn't outbid Tubi.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Amazon's really hard up for cash. They might be now, but we brought up the topic of conversation because of this. That's one of the reasons that we're even watched Suspiria in the first place is because it's kind of at the center of this whole controversy.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well,
Mhm.
do the rights holders have the right to censor what is effectively a historical document, or to suppress it so that it's not something that's broadly viewed anymore? Not really.
I don't know if I would call what they're. I don't know if I'd put this under censorship. But what I would say is I feel like it's very shady. It's stuff that Amazon often does where they present things in a way where they're going to show you the buttons they want you to see so that you go down the path that they want you to go. And I don't like that when I go to Amazon, like, because when we had the conversation about the new Suspiria and we went on
you
to
got upset, man.
Yeah, I got mad because I went onto Amazon and I typed in Suspiria because I remembered a few years ago, like I'm pretty sure I watched it on Amazon. I don't know, maybe it was another streaming service. I thought I had seen it on Amazon at one point, but I expected at least for the first thing to be the original Suspiria, and instead it's this remake. And I don't know. I feel like
even on YouTube, if you go to YouTube, it's gonna, if you like put in Suspiria trailer, you're gonna go through about 8 videos before you actually hit the Argento version, and not like either the trailer or the clip from the Amazon version.
Yeah, that's a crime. That's like when you type in RoboCop and the first thing that comes up in Google is the remake. It's like, come on, like, you know, like,
yeah.
So, you know, like I'll give the like a movie like The Fly. I get why that, like, the remake of The Fly would be the first thing on the list, because that's one of those rare cases where the remake was genuinely
is another
superior.
One. Yeah, The Thing was a remake that was superior, and there's a few of those, you know.
The Thing would be another one, maybe, you know, but like
sure, but that's a grassroots thing. Like the culture decided that was the most relevant.
I do think Howard Hawks' The Thing from Another World is actually a fantastic movie. I understand why the Carpenter version, but the original has some really amazing stuff going on.
No, that's fair. I don't know that I know that movie that well, so I'm probably just repeating things I've heard. But I guess my point is that, you know, it seems odd when you type in a movie is like everybody, like even people that haven't seen Suspiria, they all have like that image of the iconic, like you know what I mean, like the old VHS cover or whatever, right? And so they all know the name and they all have like an image that pops to mind when they think of it, and it's just weird that you type in Suspiria and this newer version that I don't think that many people, frankly, have heard of is the first thing that pops up. Like,
well, it certainly doesn't have like, having seen both of them, the new one is it's a great movie, and I do really enjoy it. Like, I'd 4 out of 5 stars. It's really, really good. But it is not this movie. Like, this Suspiria, this is a cultural touchstone. Like, this is an important movie. It's not just a great movie. This movie inspired generations of filmmakers. Like, man, nah.
It's had a big cultural impact, this movie. It's had
and corporations now have found that they have an unprecedented power to edit culture to benefit them, and it is unethical to do so. So
I guess they do, but then there's torrents, so they're not.
Yes, thank God for people that are willing to do those sort of things. But
the other thing I wanted to say is I would highly recommend, if people are interested in this movie, they might want to check out films like The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. They might want to check out Opera. You know, Deep Red was one that I really liked. I also this one doesn't get as much praise, I think, but I liked Phenomena. I thought that was a pretty good movie. You know, like, I just think, you know, checking out some of his other movies is definitely worth your time. He just has a very strong visual and sonic style that I think really works.
Sonic style is a good way, because it's not even music exactly. There is music, but it's almost just more in the way that music hits you, you know? There's something almost physical about it.
Sound. I mean, and that's an important element of movies, you know? Like, so...
It is.
So yeah, I don't know. Anything else we want to add about this before we head out?
We got our political tirade in there. I think I'm done.
I think we've done it. Yeah, we've had a good detour. I'm ready.
Nothing more ever need be said about Suspiria. Case closed.
Well, we're gonna have to watch the new Suspiria and comic as well. But I'm very curious how me and Adam will react, because we're old men.
So I do want to watch.
Interesting to see.
I think you'll like it. It's definitely a distinct experience from this, but it is very smart and well made, and they have an incredible cast. Like,
Okay.
really,
Yeah,
the
I
cast
like
kind
cast a
of.
lot.
There's a lot to be impressed with in the movie, but the cast is incredible. So,
Okay. Okay. All right. So yeah, maybe, I mean, I don't know if that's going to be our next movie or not, but it'll be a movie that we'll be doing in the future for sure. And I guess until next time, we'll talk to you later.